Thank you everybody for joining. My name is Amanda Herzog. I'm the founder of Intertalents in Sweden, where we offer online courses, ebooks, career coaching, other type of coaching like visa consultation and so on, and any other resource that we feel can help foreign-born professionals to find career success in Sweden. So if you haven't yet, please visit our website, intertalentsinSweden.com. And we're also on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn page, so make sure you're following us because a lot of the events, we have a lot of similar events to the one that we're having today, where we're always trying to talk about the most relevant topics to help us solve these issues in the Swedish labor market. And a little bit about the event today. So we will be focusing on the Applicant Tracking System, which is usually referred to as ATS, and trying to understand how does it work in Sweden, because you can find maybe some articles online about ATS, but is this how it's being used in Sweden? A lot of us know by now that Sweden has a very unique job market, so those are some questions that we want to answer, commonly asked questions. And so the session today will be held in English, so everything we're discussing is in English for everyone to understand. If you are listening, you can join or leave at any time. You can just come and go. And if you want to catch the rest of this session later, we do have it recorded, and we add it to the Intertalents in Sweden YouTube channel, usually about a week later, so you can actually listen to all of our previous LinkedIn Lives there, and this one will be uploaded there as well. Usually we have a live Q&A. This time what we wanted to do is collect some of the questions in advance, and we will basically be answering them throughout the session. But if we have time at the end, we will open for a live Q&A. And the way that this works is you can join it's like a speaker box, and we will answer the questions in consecutive order. So just make sure that you go ahead and join that if you would like to ask me or Maria a question at the end. And so what I want to do is introduce Maria. Maria Petrescu is a Gothenburg-based digital strategist. She's not a recruiter, but she has learned a lot about the ATS systems when she was working for a Swedish recruitment company, and she's done a lot of research and experimentation to learn this on her own. So what we will do is have her join us today to teach us what we should know and what she has learned. So Maria, can you please give us a little bit of an introduction to your background, why you're so interested to learn about this, and how you got into this interesting topic?
Thank you so much, Amanda. So yeah, you are correct. I am a digital strategist and growth hacker based in Gothenburg. I've moved here in 2021, and as everyone else, have joined the search for a job, in the Swedish job market. And I have very quickly discovered that it didn't work the way it worked in my own homeland. So especially after, being rejected a bunch of times and sending in so many applications and not getting any answers, I started trying to understand, what to do and how to do it better so that I could reach my goal, which was to get a position, which is, I suppose, the goal for everyone who's listening to us today, and is trying to find the right way to leverage this mysterious tool to fuel their job search. So the thing is, I've tried to find some answers by myself, and I've been fortunate enough to work for this recruitment company based in Gothenburg. I've done a digital strategy for them, so not recruitment, but I have been able to see firsthand how it works and what the platform looks like from the other side. So from the recruiter's perspective. So I think this is like the most useful thing that I can bring to this conversation today, which is knowing how the thing works, both from the applicant, candidate, job seeker side and from the recruiter's side. and maybe give, some tips and some advice, and help people understand how it works so that they can use that to adjust their strategy in job seeking.
Okay, that sounds really fascinating, because I think we hear advice maybe from the candidate side a lot, especially if we're doing some research on our own. We might find a YouTube video or something, but it really is a totally different type of advice that you get when somebody has seen it on the back end and they're not just researching it online, but living it, experiencing it. You can see how it works in real time. So with that being said, let's just start with right away with the questions. We're going to start at the beginning and sort of work our way down. And the most critical question that I think we all have is the big one. What exactly is the ATS and what does it do?
Right, so an ATS, as the acronym suggests, is an applicant tracking system, which is essentially a platform that allows companies and recruiters to post jobs, collect applications, and manage every step of the selection process. The thing is, and this is something that I didn't know, ATS systems have been around since the 70s. Yes, in much more reduced kind of formats, and they were essentially human run, but they have been around for a long time. And the ones we have today are much more advanced, and they can do a lot of stuff. Since the advent of the AI, kind of generative AI stage of the digital era, there have been a lot of functionalities that have been added to these tools in order to make the experience easier and quicker, and make the job easier for recruiters, in essence. One reason why ATS platforms got more popular is, without a doubt, GDPR, which is the European privacy law, essentially. So the reason why you sometimes see, for example, in job descriptions, please don't send us your CV on email. If you want to apply for this job, do it through this link on this platform. That is because recruiters cannot have your personal data on their own devices, platforms, emails, etc. So having an ATS platform to manage all of this allows recruiters to safely and legally handle your data. Another reason is just the sheer volume of applications and CVs that a recruiter gets for every job ad that they put out. It's like hundreds of applicants. So the ATS allows you to have them in order. Imagine if you had them in your email, right? You have like these hundreds and hundreds of emails and people responding and writing again. It would be chaos. Whereas if you have this kind of system, it is much easier to collect everything, have it all in order, and proceed with the selection in a orderly manner. And then the third reason why ATS platforms have become more popular is that with cloud and internet, especially from the 90s onward, but especially during the last few years, it has become much cheaper for companies to afford one of these. Originally, they were super expensive, and only the biggest players, like the big companies, would be able to afford such software. But now, basically, the prices are so affordable that even very small agencies, like recruitment agencies, can afford to have one and use one. Finally, there are hundreds of ATS platforms, because the ATS is not like an entity. It indicates a specific type of software. So it's like a platform where the recruiter logs in and they have their dashboard and they can post job ads and they can have their little like landing page, website, career site. That's when you see like a careers site, that's usually hosted on the ATS platform. There are several, and I've noticed that the ones that are most used in Sweden are not the ones that are most used in other countries. I think the favorite ones here are Team Tailor. That would be like the first one. I've seen it everywhere. Ponti, Recman, Volvo has one that is called SAP Success Factors, which also integrates within their HR system, and it's just this little section dedicated to recruitment. But you need to realize that for big companies like Volvo, for example, recruitment is just a little piece, and then there's the integration with the HR management system, which is handling payrolls, contracts, leaves, that kind of thing. So it's part of a bigger picture, right?
Yeah, and for those of you who are a little curious to study these ATS systems or software in more detail, because I think, Maria, it's really good that you're mentioning that ATS is a software. It's just kind of a name, but there's different brands and they operate a little bit differently. So if anyone is particularly interested in how do you spell these or what are the names again, you can just send Maria a private message here on LinkedIn, and I'm sure she would be happy to share this text with you. But thanks for sharing that. I mean, I didn't even know some of this information, but it makes a lot of sense, especially when I get a lot of questions, should I email the recruiter? It makes sense that you can't really send your CV through an email because of GDPR. They can't really keep it, and they'll let you know that they'll reroute you to put it in through this system, which is ATS. So it's good for us to comprehend this. But why don't we go a little bit deeper and can we go into the details? Like, how does the ATS process work? Once they send in their CV, what happens?
Right. So in order to help you visualize that, let's pretend that the ATS isn't some software, but is like a physical system that you implement for yourself when recruiting. So imagine you're a recruiter. You don't have any sort of digital systems at your fingertips to use. So what do? You collect CVs for a certain job ad, right? So you're sitting at your desk and you have in front of you 400 CVs. Imagine, so with an average of 2 pages per CV, that's going to be like 800, let's say 1,000 pages to read. That's going to take you a lot of time. So the issue here, the first issue, is that it is simply not profitable to spend a recruiter's time, which is expensive for a company, to be just reading through CVs as if they were novels, right? So if you have an intern, right, you would say, okay, hello, my intern. We're looking for someone who has like at least these 3 or 4 characteristics. Okay, let's say we're looking for someone who absolutely is a native Swedish speaker. So you're going to have your intern go through all of these CVs and filter out the ones that don't, meet this expectation, right? That don't have Swedish as a native language. And then you're going to say, okay, we also need someone who absolutely needs to have at least 3 years in the industry. Like, that's the cutoff. Okay, good. And they do that again and again and again. It's going to take a lot of time if a human has to do it. And it's simply not profitable because recruiting is expensive. And the more hours you put into it, the more expensive it is. So here is where the ATS functionalities come in, because, as I said, since it is a software and it is a platform where you can log in, it also has a bunch of add-ons that you can install within it. You can choose to install several kinds of extra goodies in there, especially Teamteller, which is the platform I have most experience with. They have a bunch of functionalities that are, implementable, and you can just download them and implement them on your own system. For example, the newsletters to send to your candidate database, or particular integrations that you can do with HR systems, and so on and so forth. But the thing is that at this point, with these new tools, you can avoid all of the intern skimming through CVs for hours and hours, and you can have essentially the most basic kind of ATS filter, which is a search and match, right? So you start with the job ad, and in your own interview with the client, the company that is hiring, you're still the recruiter, right? And they're going to say, okay, we really need these 3 things. These are non-negotiable. The rest is going to be a wish list more than a requirement list, right? So you as a recruiter then use the ATS to filter out everyone who doesn't meet like the hard expectations that the client has given you, okay? So that's the first step. And then once you get to that point, you are left with about 10% of your initial candidate pool, right? Which is insane. It's very little. There are some, so as I said before, every ATS is a little bit different, and some of them, are used differently even by different recruiters, because in the end, it's always a human who is running the machine, so to speak. There are some ATS platforms that allow you to give a score to each candidate based on the skills they have, the experience, their education, and so on and so forth, right? So then you can have like a list, and based on the job description and based on the requirements that the client has set for you, you then have within the candidates who have applied kind of a list, like from best to worst, right? So what's going to happen is you're going to pick the first 20 maybe to look at more closely, or the first 30. And if you're starting with a 300 CV pool, then that means it's like a 10%. And within that, that's when an actual human looks at the CV, and that's when you have to do something more than just meeting the expectations, like the hard expectations of the job ad. But I think that's actually a conversation that is more appropriate for the CV course that is coming up soon. Amanda?
Yes, so we are at Intertalents. We are working on a new course that hopefully can launch before the summer starts, which I know isn't the best time to launch, but job searching and needing a job doesn't stop just because it's summertime. That's my thought. And so we are working on our next course, which is how do you make a Swedish style CV? And Maria, you and I are doing some sort of collaboration in that aspect when it comes to this. And so some of this information about how do you make a CV that's ATS friendly, especially for those systems used in Sweden, will be covered in more detail in this course. So if anyone's interested for this, you can actually go to the description of this LinkedIn Live, and there's a link where you can just sign up for the wait list, which means you will be the first to get notified when we do release it. You'll be the one who will get notified when we give pre-sale discounts and so on. So thanks for bringing that up. And I just have a quick comment about something you mentioned a minute ago when you were saying that the ATS functionalities allow the recruiter to create filters, and a lot of these filters are based on the job description and they're in the job ad. So that's just a little bit of a clue and a hint for those of you who are listening, especially if you're a job seeker. If you're wondering like, okay, what should I put in my CV to make it to that 10%? Well, the clues are in the ad. I highly suggest that you take this ad, and if you really want to go old school, you can copy and paste it onto a Word document or something and just highlight when they literally say, we prefer someone who has 3 years of experience in this, we prefer someone who has this and that. So if you really want this job, you can highlight that in your CV. But we're going to get more into this a little bit later, and a lot of this will be covered in the CV course that we're working on now. So I just wanted to mention that little hint for those of you who are listening. And the next question that I have is, when you create a CV, what format should you submit it in? Should it be a Word document? Should it be a PDF? Or what would you recommend is the most ATS friendly format for a CV document?
Right. So I would say a PDF at this point in time, 2024, is the best format. But there are some caveats. So the thing is, we used to not prefer PDFs because the old ATS systems weren't capable of reading them. That's the reason why a Word file was preferred. And it would be like, don't put any pictures, don't put any graphics, don't use tables, because then the ATS is not going to be able to read it. But that's no longer the case at this point, because the ATS systems have evolved so much that they have absolutely no problem reading them. The only thing that I would say is super important is do not flatten your PDF. Do not flatten your PDF when you export it.
What do you mean by flatten a PDF?
Right. So when you are creating a visual file, whether you're doing it in Canva or Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign or whatever tool you're using, you are essentially putting layers upon layers of stuff, right? There's a layer that is the text, and then there's layers that are graphic elements or images, pictures, whatever. When you export your file, you need to make sure you're exporting it as a PDF document and not as a PDF image, or even worse, exporting it as an image like PNG or JPEG, because that's going to fuse all of the layers together and your text is going to become image, if that makes sense. So essentially, what you want to do to make sure that your PDF is readable is open your PDF, your CV, select all of the text, and then do like copy, Command C or Control C if you have a Windows computer, and then open a text file, whatever it is, it can be anything, and paste. And see what happens. If you are able to see like the text of your CV in words and not like symbols or nothing at all, then it means that your CV is readable. The key is to have actual words that are in your CV so that ATS can read them. And I also need to say something here about this, because I've noticed this, especially now with like the ChatGPT craze and the generative AI craze. There's a lot of people who are rewriting their job roles like data rock star, or I don't know, that kind of like cheesy, cleverish names.
Yeah, please
for
don't do that.
Experiences. The problem is that they're going to search for the actual official role, name of the role. So if you're being clever, you are kind of shooting yourself in the foot, because then it doesn't recognize that as experience in the field that they're looking for, you know?
Yeah, so basically what you mean is it's not a keyword and you're taking up like valuable limited space of text that should be focused on matching the CV to the role. But when you use words like, rock star or whatever, if you're trying to go through this system, it's like you're kind of disqualifying yourself. That's basically what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a shame, because, it's important to be able to highlight your experience in a particular field. And this is like the first layer of filtering. It's going to be much worse later on, in the hiring process. So it's good to always say exactly the job role. So I had a conversation with a recruiter some time ago, and I mentioned that I wanted to be a digital strategist. And she looked at my CV and she's like, okay, but these words are nowhere in your CV. I'm like, yeah, well, yes, but I've done this and this and this, and that means that, I don't have time to imagine what you meant. You have to make it like super clear. And I think, this is the best thing that you can do for yourself is to take that job ad that you're interested in, and for each requirement, find a place in your CV where that requirement shines.
I see where this is going.
Yeah.
Basically, copy and paste the mirror image into your CV if it applies to you. If you have the experience and they're using a keyword and you've done that job, but it's not in your CV, replace whatever words you're using with their words. That's like the simplest way to do it. And also, I wanted to comment on something you said about making visual CVs. I usually encourage people to play it safe and avoid visual, like really heavily graphic CVs, but some people work in creative industries where it makes sense to do it. So for those who are in these creative industries who want like a really like colorful CV or something to show off their skills, I think that's really practical advice that you're giving about how to save it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, if you're a creative specialist of whatever sort, designer or graphic artist or whatever, you will want to showcase that kind of talent also within like how your CV looks like, right? That is absolutely correct. Recruiters love that, because I think we have to not forget something very important. The ATS is just first line of defense, let's say. But then at one point, if you do match the requirements, your CV is going to be seen by a human. And these humans see hundreds of CVs a day. And after a while, they all look the same. And they are, very similar in format. I've seen hundreds of CVs. And in the end, the ones that you keep seeing and the formats that you keep seeing, they're all the same. They all look the same, especially after you've seen so many, right? So if you are in one of those creative industries, my advice would definitely be to stand out, but not forget that the ATS is based on text. So if you, for example, if you want to showcase that you speak several languages, it might be better to write the name of the languages that you speak and not use some clever flag thing, right? Because if you're going to put the flags, that looks really cool, right? Especially in a visual CV, but the ATS won't be able to read it. So if you're saying, "Oh, I speak native flag," it's not going to help you.
Mm-hmm. So they should just write the text out.
Yes. And, I've taken this advice from one of your previous live events, which is to write a very understandable explanation of your language level, because not everyone will know what the CEFR language framework looks like, what it means. So write like fluent or conversational, or the favorite right now is the obehindrat på svenska, which is which is the one that I've seen most frequently in job ads.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's move ahead a little bit. So, do you have any insights into what the hiring scene looks like at the moment? Are there any like statistics or something you can share with us?
Right. So, I mean, I might not be the best person to ask this specific question because I'm not a recruiter, but I've done some kind of research and I've seen some trends and some contradictions, sadly, as well. I've seen that 95% of job ads that are published are actually already for someone. And what that means is that maybe there is a hiring manager who needs a resource in their team and they already know who they want because they've worked together before, because reasons. But legally, they do have to publish the ad in order to give everyone the chance to apply, even though that role is already designed and assigned to someone. So sadly, the reality we live in right now in Sweden is that we're all fighting for that 5% of jobs that are actually open and not already assigned to someone. Apart from that, I think I mentioned before that just 10% of applicants actually have the requirements the requirements asked for the job, the qualifications that they need to have. So again, it becomes smaller and smaller. The chance of being selected to go forward is essentially just a game of numbers, practically, because when the odds are so bad, it means that you need to send out a lot of applications. I think from the conversations I've had with you, but also with other people, the average is about 800 applications before they got to their selected, like, dream job position, whatever. A year and a half on average.
Let's just talk about this a little bit more for a moment, because you say 95% of job ads are already created with someone else in mind, and they're just kind of posting. It's almost like a ghost ad. They're posting it legally, but they're not actually actively recruiting or talking to people. I'm not sure if I completely would believe that it's literally 95%, but I do know that it can be quite a high percentage. You also said 10% of applicants have the qualifications required for a job. I can believe that because based on my statistics from another side, you have a 10% chance of getting a job if you cold apply. So I guess a deeper meaning that we can kind of take from this is, number one, it is a little bit disheartening to think like, wow, how am I supposed to get a job if I only have like a 5 or 10% chance? But in Sweden, the good news is if that job could be for you, you could be that someone behind the scenes. And you can network your way to a job in Sweden if you learn the proper way to do that. I do have a free networking webinar on the Intertalents in Sweden website. If you go to intertalentsinsweden.com to the Learn page, you scroll down just a little bit and you'll see a free webinar that you can download that will actually teach you how you could be this person on the other side. So on the one hand, yeah, it does make things way more difficult and it can be extremely frustrating. But on the other hand, you could just change your strategy and see if you can go for that alternative angle. But for those of you who are trying to do a little bit of both, or I also want to add this third point. Yes, there's maybe a 5 to 10% chance, but you could become really good at understanding and working with ATS systems. I've personally done it myself, where I was getting maybe 1 to 3 interviews per month, sometimes 5 consistently. And I had the same amount of recruiters contacting me on LinkedIn, which in a way is kind of like an ATS system in itself. So I just want to add that so that people here don't get totally discouraged. It just means you have to be really strategic with how you're going about job searching. So talking about LinkedIn, I want to ask you about a trend that I'm seeing people talk about, that they could have 100% of the requirements. Like they'll find a job and say, I'm 100%. I mean, I reach all of these and more, but then they'll get an interview or they'll get an email back that says, sorry, you're overqualified for the position. Can you just talk about why that happens?
Right. I've had this happen before, and it was very disheartening and frustrating. But the thing is, in Sweden, the expectation is for you to be a good fit and to thrive in your role. Especially if we're talking like office kind of roles. The happier you are, the better you will perform. I think that's the underlying
Agreed.
That's the underlying understanding that everyone has. So what happens is, if you have like 100% of the requirements, then you're overqualified. In other words, I've seen this explained as you're gonna get bored out of your mind on this job, and you won't have any room to grow. So that's one reason why you might encounter this kind of situation. Of course, there are other. It's not always black and white, right? Because if you really, really want to work for a certain company, then your interactions with that company and the people working within that company are going to be different. If you're like, oh, okay, I'm overqualified, whatever. But what happens if you say, all right, I know I might be overqualified, but I really, really want to work with this company because ABC reasons. It might not work because they might say, we don't have anything for you at this stage. But one thing that I've noticed is that companies are much more likely to want to work with someone who is really passionate about that company, instead of someone who's just, this is like the 800th CPM saying today, I don't even know who you are and what you do, What I've also seen is you have to look at it from another side as well, because 100% of requirements might be too much, like overqualified, but there is also like a minimum viable percentage of requirements requirements you should have, because of course if they're hiring for a chief marketing officer, for example, or a senior financial analyst, they're not going to be there to teach you how to do your job, right? So I've seen this other trend on LinkedIn where they're like, oh, even if you have like 50% or 60% of requirements, apply anyway. Yes, but if you think about it, in Sweden at least, you have hundreds of applicants and you're going to have 10% who actually have like the key requirements in their experience and in their skills and whatever. So they are going to choose among that 10%, right? They're not going, in most of the cases, they're not going to say, oh, let's forget about this 10% who's qualified to do the job and let's pick someone who we have to train. That's probably going to happen more for an entry-level job or intern jobs, but certainly not for more senior roles. Unless you look at what is missing in terms of, okay, I do have this kind of basis on which to build, and this is my space to grow. But let's not lie to ourselves and be delusional about this, because in the end, companies are trying to fix a problem, because that's what hiring is. It's fixing a lack of skills and competence within the company. And that's it. They're trying to find someone who has that, not someone whom they need to train to do that.
That makes sense. So how can we know whether a company is using ATS to select candidates? I mean, how would someone figure out, like, are they using this system and what should I do about it?
Well, the short answer is everyone or almost everyone is using an ATS at the moment, regardless of size. I think we also had a question asking how many companies with how many employees will usually use ATS in Sweden. And it doesn't matter. I've seen recruitment agencies with 2 people who are using ATS to manage their workload. The long answer is that if you're looking at ATS as a platform, everyone is using it because GDPR, because amount of CVs and everything we talked about earlier. If you're looking at the functionalities, well, that depends on the recruiter because every recruiter is different and they do different things and they use it in different ways and leverage different functionalities within the platform. The easiest way to see if what you're doing is applying through an ATS platform is to look at the URL. And usually you're going to have the name of the company or the name of the recruitment agency in the URL, and then another name. And that's going to be Team Taylor, and that's going to be Ponty, or whatever. If you're not sure, if you've never seen like that name before, try Googling it. And if the result is something like, your ATS platform to manage your recruitment needs, that's an ATS. But again, essentially everyone is using them.
So what we hear is a lot of, from the candidate side, as you've mentioned earlier at the beginning of this session, ATS can be seen as this like negative entity that's keeping us from jobs. But as we're learning more about this, it's just a tool that we can learn how to navigate and potentially, put things in our favor. So are there any positives to ATS for the candidates? If there are, which I'm sure you would know, what would they be?
Well, the very first one would be the fact that the ATS allows for opaque selection, which in other words means that it selects for skills and experience and hard information without looking at discriminatory aspects of the person. So it's a good way to avoid discrimination and bias in hiring. I think that's like the most important one and the one that most benefits the candidates. Another one would be, and this is one that I've seen recently. So there was this company who decided to make the same offer to the 2 top candidates, and they wanted to give the position to the candidate who accepted first. Now, if you're doing this like manually, humanly, you can do it. An ATS will not allow you to do it because you can only make one offer at a time. So if your first choice rejects your offer, then you can go on with the second one, right? So this is also a sort of protection for the candidate against these kinds of unethical choices in hiring. Again, every recruiter is different and every recruiter has their own ethical values that they operate on. So I'm not trying to make like a generalization here, but it is a tool, and it is a tool that can help candidates get fairer treatment for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really good positive with ATS. It's good for us to know, and especially with a lot of internationals in Sweden feel like discrimination happens in the hiring process. And I've heard of several companies and startups and organizations who are really working to create ATS systems that can help us to avoid discrimination by focusing more on the skills and the capabilities of the candidate first. And by the time they see a human, that the CV sees a human, it's like it's a little bit more of a fair and realistic chance. Now, once it reaches the human, that's a whole nother story. But the idea is that there are some positive qualities of ATS in that way. So, yeah. So another question that I have, speaking of ATS, I believe that LinkedIn is some version of ATS. I mean, if you go to the jobs section on LinkedIn, I usually recommend that a lot of my coaching clients, if they come to me to say, hey, can you help me get a job? Here's my CV. I'll say, really, you can test it out by going to LinkedIn and typing in some jobs you're searching for, and it'll sort of compare it to your LinkedIn profile, which I imagine is similar to how ATS works. So I've heard that you have some advice that you can share with us on how can you actually leverage your LinkedIn profile to apply for, let's say, multiple jobs. What advice would you give?
Well, if you're trying to just use LinkedIn, then there is one resource, as you mentioned, that is really very, very useful within the jobs section of LinkedIn, and that's the Premium Resume Insights. So when you go there, it's going to ask you to select a job title, and you can only select a job title from a list. So you can't put any rock star nonsense in there. So once you've done that, it's going to look at your resume and give you insights on how to make it better for that job description, for that job title. And also it suggests keywords and skills that you should have for that specific role. So if you're trying to use LinkedIn, I think that's a fantastic tool. It also has other stuff in there in the job section. So for example, how to prepare for interviews or that kind of thing. That's also very, very useful. And you should definitely use it if you have the chance.
Do you have any other online tools or websites other than LinkedIn that we could use to know, like, for example, is our CV or resume, for those of you who are in some other parts of the world, CV and resume are used interchangeably a bit, but it's the same thing in Sweden. Yeah. But let's say someone has like a job description and then they have their CV and they want to test, like, before, they don't want to just throw it into the system. They want to actually see a score. So can you recommend like a website for someone to use?
So there are a ton right now, and it seems like every day there are more coming out, but I have two that I've kind of tried out and I liked. One that is free is wasber.com, and that one I think is really nice. It's very basic in the sense based on that job ad, it's going to compare it to your CV and see if it works for that. It's going to give you a score. So that's Wasber. And then the other one, which is sadly not free, is tealhq.com. So that one is pretty good. And that one also allows you to put to keep track of your applications and everything. So that's really good. I think these two are the best ones. And if you want to use a platform to do your own CV, you can use something like Visual CV. The thing is, when you're building your CV, the most important thing that you have to think about is, do I want something that is going to allow me to very easily add stuff and change stuff? Or do I want to make it a little bit more pretty? Because if the idea is to have it like super, super easy, like super quick, and you just put in the text and it's going to compose itself, then something like Wasber or Visual CV are going to work well for you. But they don't look amazing, right? If you want something to look amazing, I would recommend Canva, or one of thousands upon thousands of templates that you can download and use in Photoshop or Illustrator or InDesign, whatever is your choice. But of course, whenever you need to change something in there, you have to move around everything again, right? So it's not going to be as easy to modify as the ones with the platforms. So it's up to you.
I've actually heard some mixed reviews about Canva. A lot of people who work on the recruiting or career coaching side, they kind of move people away from using Canva because I've heard that it's not as ATS friendly as some other ones. One that I usually like to use if you want to have like a mixture between like a unique design, so it's not just plain black and white, but is ATS friendly, is a website called Novo Resume. They claim that they actually make it so that it's ATS friendly, and they have quite a bit of articles on their website as well, just teaching about ATS. So that's something that I would say on that part. But I think we received a question here which kind of ties into this topic. Somebody asked that they've been creating their CV through Europass, which I'm sure a lot of people listening here have used Europass. I mean, it's very a common tool. They want to know, is this ATS friendly?
As long as it's readable and it's text, yes, absolutely. It might not be the most fashionable CV out there at this point because it's kind of fallen out of favor at this. It's old fashioned. It's very 90s. It does get the job done, but again, there will come a time where a human will see your CV, and if they're looking at a CV with like the Europass format, they're going to be like, oh, okay, this person is like back in time, I guess, right? Which it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you need to understand that also speaks about you and the kind of things that you gravitate towards and so on and so forth. It tells a lot about the tools you use, how early you adopt technology, and so on.
So I have a follow-up question for you then, because I hear some contradictions sometimes, and I'm always trying to learn like what's the most common up-to-date knowledge, where I hear that it's just to be on the safe side, you should have somewhat of a plain, simplistic, like traditional CV layout where it's one column, it's probably black and white, and you don't have a picture, or it's just like you if anything, it's the farthest from standing out. And on the one side, I've heard recruiters and hiring managers say, well, this is the easiest format because since it's the most commonly used one, we know already how to navigate it. And we've all heard, most of us have heard, that recruiters will look through a CV in 6 to 10 seconds, 10 if you're being generous, but let's just say 6 to 10 seconds. So when it's a format that they understand, even though it's plain, it's also very functional. But then, of course, as you say, once it goes through the ATS system, a human's going to read it on the other side, and they are looking through, let's just say 10%. Like if you go to any job ad and let's say on LinkedIn, 100 to 200 people have applied for it, and they're going to look at 10%. They're still looking at 10 to 20, possibly 30 CVs, let's just say, and you still need to stand out from those. So you've seen the other side when there's a recruiter or a hiring manager looking at this. Like, how do you know that's a benefit, that somebody is doing something a little bit more than just a plain CV? Like, what are your recommendations to find a perfect balance between going through the ATS and making it efficient, easy to read, but also standing out? Because there really is advice from many different directions.
This one has as the best answer, it depends, but I am going to try to dig in a little bit. CVs don't need to be plain in order to pass the ATS filters. They just need to have readable text. And when I say readable, I mean like actually readable and selectable. Other than that, when you have your CV reach human eyes, since those eyes have seen so many CVs, they already know where stuff is. They already know that on the top, we're going to have a name, a job description, like job title, and then you're going to have a section maybe on the side with some skills and education, and then there's going to be a main section with your experience, maybe a summary. I mean, these are like the basic parts of it that every CV has. And the most common formats are done in such a way where you already know more or less where this stuff is going to be. For like 99% of jobs, that's good enough, right? If you're looking for a super creative, then maybe you're looking for something a little bit more interesting visually. But that's only for creatives, right? If you're looking for a project manager role, you don't need to go out of your way to make it look colorful and crazy and put things in places where the recruiter is not going to know what they're looking at, right? That being said, you can absolutely do some sort of personal branding for yourself, where you choose like some colors that represent you, and you can use the same colors in your website, in your LinkedIn profile. It's like a product, okay? But it's you, essentially, right? So you have to choose a series of graphic things that are you, that look like you. And I think that's very valuable, because whenever they're going to look for you on other platforms, which is inevitably going to happen, because they're going to check your LinkedIn, they're going to check your website if you have one. If you have this coherent image of yourself online, then you're going to stand out. And again, if you have like, there are so many Canva templates, for example, that are really, really pretty, that still respect the main kind of template rules of where stuff is, while still bringing a little bit of, beautiful kind of graphic harmony that is pleasing to the eye, and is not just the same black and white text only soup that we've seen so often.
Mm-hmm. I usually say to people, if you really want to test it out, because for some people they just want to be on the safe side, and they'll just try like a very simple black and white, one column, like basic CV layout. And then there's others who want to be more creative, or maybe use a template on Canva. I recommend do an A/B test. And what that means is do 2 different CVs, do the plain one, and then do the one that has, the graphics and the extra things that you want to add. Apply to some of the same roles. Apply for 10 roles with this one and 10 roles with that one, and just see what happens. I would also recommend making sure that you know which job you applied to with which CV, so you can keep track of the outcome. But that's just one suggestion that I make to people who are kind of torn between the 2 options. But since we're talking about graphics, here's like a really popular question, and even myself, like I've heard some mixed reviews on it, but will the ATS reject photos if we include a photo of ourselves in the CV?
The ATS will not reject anything by definition. It is a filter. So whether you have a picture or not really doesn't matter, and in Sweden, at least, when it comes to the selection. It's not going to increase or decrease your chances in the ATS filtering stage. It's a totally different matter once, again, the CV reaches human eyes, because, that can help you in some recruiters' opinion. It can harm you in other recruiters' opinion. I'm not a recruiter, but I've heard a lot of debate about this, and there are like 2 different schools about this matter. The thing with the ATS regarding pictures is that older ATS systems weren't able to process pictures, which is why it was not advised to put any pictures in your CV. But again, they're so advanced now and so evolved that it's no longer a problem.
I've actually heard some interesting statistics about including a photo in your CV, that around 80% of CVs with photos are rejected. Now, this statistics and the source that I got it from, they didn't specify if it was rejected because of the human or because of ATS. So that's why I wanted to ask. And it sounds like what you're saying is it's really unlikely with the new ATS programs that we have. Like maybe a while ago in the beginning, graphics might have been rejected, but it kind of sounds like we're leaning more in the direction of human bias. So, I mean, that's a really popular question I get asked is, should we include a photo in your CV? Again, I say do the A/B test, but if you look at the statistics, it's probably safer not to include a photo, but just test that out. But now that we're kind of talking about people having biased opinions in the hiring process, I just want to bring up kind of a controversial question, but it needs to be asked. We need to talk about it, and we have to start finding solutions to it. So do our names hold some level of bias with recruiters, or let's say an ATS system when they're scanning an application during the hiring process, especially if you might have a foreign name. I mean, we have heard stories. There's actually studies out there. It's not just a story. There have been news articles published. There's been like professional studies that were done and experiments where someone will have a CV and they won't change anything on the CV. They won't change the layout, their qualifications. They'll just change their name to make it more Swedish sounding. And all of a sudden they go from like no interviews to a ton of interview, maybe like 1 to 3 in a week or a month or something. So can you share any insights on, is the ATS responsible at all for this, or does this go beyond just ATS and it goes towards the human side?
I've also read a ton of articles about this, and I researched a bit because I was also curious. And if anything, the ATS protects against this kind of bias because especially in the first stage of selection, it will hide information from the recruiter himself or herself about the name or whatever, and it will present like the rows of candidates that it considers best fitted for the job, regardless of this kind of information like the picture or name or whatever. I recently had a chat with a recruiter who told me that the way they operate is for clients. We're talking about recruiters who have clients, companies hiring the agency to recruit for them. And she told me that when they present candidates, they hide both the image and the picture of the candidate and the name. So it is like a blind process. Of course, there comes a time where you will interview these people and you're going to see who they are and everything. Mm-hmm. And I think the worst part is human bias, but it depends a lot on the recruiter. It depends a lot on the company who is hiring. It comes down very often to company fit, which means something different for each company. So it's a bit of a depends kind of situation. But in general, the ATS will protect rather than harm in this specific instance.
So what we can conclude from this is that ATS is good for protecting us from discrimination, which I can definitely see how that's possible, because unless they're literally putting in a filter that says if their name doesn't fall into this category, I mean, how are they really going to filter that out? So it's like once it gets to the human who's viewing the CV, and I mean, that's a whole nother discussion. We could have a whole LinkedIn Live just on the name thing itself, but I think it's good for people to at least understand here that it's not that the ATS that's discriminating, it's the human that's discriminating. But what do you think about, I know we have maybe, I don't know, 10 to 15 minutes that we could continue this. Do you want to open this up just for a few like Q&A of people who might have questions for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we can do that.
So if you guys have a question, you can go ahead and join the queue and we'll answer them one by one. So now would be a good time, and you can ask me or Maria a question. And some of you also sent in questions, so if we didn't ask your question yet or answer it, now is a good time. So we'll give you guys a second to do that. Yeah. Are there any other questions that you that we received that we didn't answer yet, Maria?
I think there is one that was a little bit more specific. Even though I get HR calls, sometimes it does not go further. Please help me understand the process. Well, just very quickly, the way this whole thing works is that the recruiter publishes a job ad. They get 300 or 400 applicants. They select the 10%, after which they go on and further select among those. And they will present to the hiring manager maybe 3 to 5 names that they consider like the best fit. And these 3 to 5 will usually get like a interview invitation or test kind of situation. And then after this happens, then the choice is made. So that's very, very quickly like how the process works. Sometimes it's more rounds of interviews. Sometimes it's maybe testing involved. Sometimes maybe this happened to you where you had an invitation to take a test, like a personality test, and these are very, very good. If you get one of these, do take them and take into account that it takes a couple of hours to complete one. But it is going to give you a very good insight in what the best fit for you would be as a professional, especially the personality tests. I've seen some research according to which these tests are the best predictors of work performance, which is why many recruiters are starting to use them now. I think we have a question.
Yeah, we have Miriam. Hi, Miriam. You're in the box.
Hi.
Miriam.
You have to unmute your microphone.
Are you with us? Miriam, you're in the speaker box. We saw that you raised your hand. Maybe we could give you a second. We also have Mary here. We have a second person.
There she is. Nope.
Okay, I think what we're going to do is join the queue again if you hear us, and we'll add you back to the box next time. So we have Mary.
Hey, hi. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, hi.
Hi.
Hi, Amanda. Hi, Miriam. Actually, I'm not sure, like I joined a little late, but I just have a question. When we go through the job description, can we really understand if the company is using ATS tool or not? The reason behind I'm asking this question is when we write our resume or when we wanted to make changes to resume, we wanted to make sure that it is ATS friendly. So some companies use ATS tools to, like bypass the lot of recruitment. How can we identify if the company is using an ATS tool or not from the job description?
So you're not going to be able to understand it from the job description. The way to understand it is to see where the job ad is hosted. So if you see in the URL that next to the company name or recruitment agency's name, you're going to have something like Team Taylor or Ponte or Recman or Success Factors or so on and so forth. You can check that, you can Google that name online and see if it's an ATS system. That's like your best bet. But at the same time, my best advice that I can give you is when you are building your CV, making it ATS friendly essentially means ATS readable, which almost all of them are. The thing is, you're trying to adapt your CV to mirror the person they're looking for the best. Mm-hmm. So even if they weren't using an ATS system, they would have a recruiter who would essentially do the same thing, and they would look at your CV and see how well your experience and your skills mirror what they're looking for. So regardless of if it's ATS or person, you still have to show them why you are a good fit. Because again, recruiters go through so many CVs that they don't really have the mental bandwidth to understand like the underlying assumption that you might make. You have to be very clear, right? You have to spell it out very clearly in the experience, the skills you have, and so on. I hope I answered your question, Mary.
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome.
Okay, we have Firas. I think that's how you pronounce it. We're adding you to the box. Yes, hi. You're in the box, Firas.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Firas. Love the audio event, by the way. Maria, loved your honesty and direct approach to everything. And Amanda, thank you for hosting this event. Seriously, this was a really good event. My question is, as someone who used to be in another field and switching to a field which is, for me, for example, it's data science. The previous field is management. As you can understand, the ATS will search for certain words when perusing through the CV. And how do you think I should approach this in order to land the job and since I'm actually skilled in this level in this sector, but my previous jobs kind of prevent me from passing through the ATS.
Right. This is really a great question, and also thank you for the compliments. So what you want is not a traditional kind of experience-based CV. The experience you will illustrate in your CV is going to show that you have worked and you have knowledge of how the work world looks like. So you haven't been sitting on your hands for the past 10 years. But you want to build a CV that is oriented towards growth and towards entering a new field. And that translates into having another section in your CV that is focused on your studies on this or your experience so far on this and what your goals are with this field, right? Also, you can emphasize these points in the cover letter. And I think the most important thing you can do is to integrate all of this with networking, because this is going to help you much more towards finding a position, which I suppose is going to be kind of entry level in the field since you don't have experience.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, in that case, it's very useful to even reach out to companies that you like in the field. And I found that even doing like a 3-month internship with a company that you like it is an investment in terms of time and money for sure, but it is going to give you the possibility to show who you are, network, meet people, and put something on your CV. I also recommend building some sort of case study for even as a freelancer or something that you can put into your portfolio to show that you know what you're talking about and have something to show. These are all things that help. There is no one thing that will fix it. You have to look at it from different perspectives and attack it from different sides, and hope for the best, because that's essentially what it is. But I would recommend not relying only on the ATS kind of tricking situation. You need more than that if you're switching fields.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Maria, do you think we have time for one more?
Yeah, we can take the last two, I think.
Okay, we have Ramya.
Yeah, hi, Amanda, Maria.
Hi.
It's been really quite insightful for me as somebody who's job hunting at the moment. So my question is about navigating, like since this is about the ATS, cracking the ATS system. A lot of recruiters I've spoken to before in the past have suggested that they don't actually use ATS, they just look at resumes like manually. And this has been the case with most of them. So do you think this is something that they're trying to cover up, the fact that they don't use ATS, or what do you think that is? Because I know the ATS is quite relevant in big companies, but when you go to career fairs and talk to hiring managers and recruiters, I get this answer from everybody. So why do you think that is? Has that happened to you guys as well at any point?
I think the answer to your question lies in the distinction between ATS as a platform and ATS as a filtering tool. So in order to collect CVs, I've honestly yet to find a recruiter who doesn't rely on some sort of ATS platform to collect CVs legally because of GDPR. Other than that, they might be very honest in saying that they don't rely on the ATS filtering to do their selection, which means that they're looking at every CV individually. But again, if you make this distinction, then it becomes clear what they mean, right? They collect the CVs with the ATS, but they don't do the filtering, the initial skimming through the ATS, which is very time consuming, but I suppose that in some fields it could work. It depends on the recruiter. As I mentioned, the ATS is a tool and everyone uses it a bit differently. So.
And let's also mention that some recruiters are out here headhunting. So sometimes they are contacting applicants directly who haven't even applied for the job. So it's almost kind of like they've skipped that process. And another thing is, Maria, you say that there's two different types of ATS. There's like a filter versus like the entire process being supported. And another question comes in is I think we need to maybe do a little bit more of a deep dive into this and speak to these recruiters, because what do they believe and how do they define ATS? You know what I mean? Like how are they defining that term? So, I mean, I think it's a good point, a very, very good question. And I think the next time you ask a recruiter this question, ask them like, how do you define ATS? And how, if you're not using ATS, how are you GDPR compliant? And then that will kind of give you a little more insight into what they're referring to.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. It's definitely something to think about, because there are a lot of ethical aspects that come with recruiting when you bring ATS into the picture. So I think, it's definitely a good point to keep in mind.
Mm-hmm. A really good question. All right, we'll take the last question here. We have Darshini. 1 second. Let me add you to the box. Okay, you should be in the speaker box. Darshini? You are in the box. If you can hear us, you just need to unmute yourself. I don't know if she's going to join us. While we're waiting on her, is there anything else you want to add to this discussion, Maria? Oh, yes. I think you've joined us. Hi.
Can you guys hear me? Oh, thanks a lot. Thanks for the event. As you know, I'm in the job hunting thing, and with so many rejections and no interview calls, sometimes feels like, and also the number of applicants for each and every sector. Like I'm trying to go into sustainability and as well as IT sector, and in both the sectors, the number of applicants seem to be a lot in LinkedIn. Whenever I see, it's always like more than 100 for each and every role. So I wonder if the Swedish recruitment system works based on reference, if they are actually, with or without using ATS, are they actually going through so many hundreds of applications? Or is it just via reference, they take whatever they get reference for, and then they take a few applications and then they go ahead with it? Because then all of these seem to be like pointless, yeah.
Very good question.
Yeah, I'm going to take the first part and then I'm going to pass the ball to you, Amanda. So the first part is that if there is no reference, then the process will rely exclusively like on the initial skimming, and then the process that we've talked about earlier, where you will have like the first 10%, the best fitting 10% from the pool of applicants, and then you'll, as a recruiter, you're going to look into that and you're going to select like 3, 4, or 5 that are like the best, right, and present them. But if there is a reference, then absolutely you have more chances of getting, noticed, at least having your CV read by a recruiter who's gonna then decide if, okay, this is someone that I will put in the next stage, right, in the next like interview stage or initial phone interview stage. But I'm gonna pass the ball to Amanda for this one because I think she has a lot more insight in this.
Yeah, so when the discussion we're having right now about ATS, it's basically just like the really true first step in a hiring process if they're getting cold applications, or sometimes even if you get a reference or referral, they still require you to go through the system, probably because there are other people than just a recruiter or even a hiring manager. I mean, usually there's a recruiter and then a hiring manager and then a team member above that, the rest of the people in the team, and they do need to organize these applications. They need to be GDPR compliant and so on. So today's LinkedIn Live is just how do you get somebody's eyes on your CV. But once somebody's looking at your CV, it's a totally different mindset shift. So imagine I'll give you some statistics. You have about a 10% chance of getting a job without any sort of reference and just competing the old-fashioned way with your CV, your experience, and your interview skills. But if you have a reference or a referral to that same job, you now have a 40% chance of getting the job, which is actually quite high in comparison. So that means if it's you and one other candidate who came through the ATS system, and this recruiter hiring manager is looking at both of you, but one of you has a reference, but you're both equally qualified and have a very similar background, they're going to be a little bit more comfortable going forward with you. So what I usually say to people is, if you're like 100% reliant on just applying for random jobs posted online to get your job, I mean, really, you're going to be frustrated. I mean, you have a 10% chance. Like, that's not a super sustainable strategy. But if you scale back and even spend 40% of your time learning how to network correctly, then you're going to have a much higher percentage of getting a job. So I'll just leave you with that. And again, you can always go to our website and check out our networking webinar. It's totally free, and it'll give you more insight into like, how do you do this? I know a lot of you are going to be wondering like, okay, how do I do this the Swedish way? You can go there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, Amanda, really your LinkedIn post kind of opened my eyes on this topic as well. So earlier I thought it was all my mistake, but then getting insights on the Sweden industry. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
If I could just slip in one more question, is one-page resume format really necessary, or could it be multiple pages?
No, not multiple pages, but consider the fact that your recruiter is a human being, and this, I think I can wrap it up with this final statement. The recruiter is a human being, and when they see a CV that is 6 pages long, their initial reaction is going to be, I ain't reading that. That's long. No, I mean, I've seen a lot of CVs, and even people with like 15 or 20 years experience can fit it all in 2 pages. You need to be It doesn't need to be too long. 2 pages, I think, is perfect. 1 page is kind of cramming everything in, and it's kind of hard to read. So don't do that. But what I've seen is like the norm. I'm not saying it's perfect, but the norm is 2 pages for a CV, 1 page for the cover letter, and then a portfolio.
Okay.
Agreed. All right. Well, thank you everybody for your questions and for attending today. I think it's time for us to wrap it up. Just some quick information. If you missed some of this or maybe only attended the second half, you can find a recording that will be posted on Intertalents in Sweden YouTube channel in about a week. Also, the information we're sharing today will probably be added to our new CV course, and it's being worked on right now. It should be released hopefully before we get too deep into summertime. So if you want to join the wait list and get informed when that's released, you can find the link in the detail section of this event. And you're always welcome to send a private message to me or Maria if you just want to know, like, maybe what are some of the names of these software systems, or how can you find the link to the networking webinar, or just additional questions. You're very welcome to message us. And is there anything you want to add, Maria, before we go?
No, thank you very much. Don't harass your recruiter, and and good luck in job hunting, because I know it's very disheartening, very hard, but it only means that some better opportunity is out there for you. So don't get discouraged. Go on. Go take your Amanda's course on networking, because that one is very, very useful. And tune in for the CV writing course, which is coming soon, hopefully.
And thank you everybody for the hearts and the thumbs up. We really appreciate your support. I mean, we do these LinkedIn lives just because we're internationals and we understand that what everyone is going through when it comes to the challenges in the job market. So yeah, thanks everyone, and have a good evening.
Thank you for having me.
Bye.